Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of COVID Chats. My guest today is Ben Spanbock. Ben is a childhood friend of mine from the days at the Heschel School. This past summer, he decided to go on a trip to Vietnam and has stayed there ever since teaching English to young Vietnamese students. It was great to hear and see from him about how coronavirus has impacted his time and travels there, especially as the impact has been felt for the past month or so, as opposed to here in the US, where the reality has only begun setting in these past couple weeks. Without further ado, here is episode 2. First off, Mr. Spanbock, how are you holding up?
I'm okay. It hasn't been too bad here yet. Vietnam, I think, is kind of an interesting case in that they did a really good job of curbing the spread of it for a while, and it's only just recently started to escalate again. We went like almost 3 weeks without a new case at a period of time, and now it's climbing again. So things are just starting to intensify a little bit more now, actually, within the last couple of weeks.
Wow, I didn't even right, because I knew you guys had an initial spike, and then I thought it had kind of been taken care of. So it's spiking again right now.
Well, yeah. So it was for the first month or so that this was all going on. They were holding steady at right around like 15 or 16 cases, and now just within the last week, 2 weeks, we're up around, the last count I saw was 65, which is still, they're doing a very good job. Like it's pretty low. Yeah.
It's
but I kind of just waiting, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's only a matter of time.
It's a waiting game. Do you think it's because there's more tests getting out to the people, more people are getting tested, or?
I don't know if it's more tests, but so when this all was going on, it started right over Tet, which is Chinese New Year. Just the name in Vietnam is Tet. And my roommates and I, we left the country. We went to Cambodia for a couple of weeks over Tet, because schools have 2 weeks off. Everyone else has at least a week off. So we went to Cambodia, and that's when it was just starting to trickle in. And we got back on, I think, like February 1st, February 2nd, something like that. And the Sunday night before I was supposed to go back to work on Monday, I got an email from my school at 5 p.m. Saying, these are the steps we're going to take to try and prevent this when we come back. Wash your hands, wear a face mask, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 9:15 that same night, so 4 hours later maybe, I got a second email from my school that said, hey, government's closed all of the schools for a week. So they closed the schools for a week, then they closed them for another week, then they closed them for another 2 weeks. So I don't know if it was testing or if they were just sort of ahead of the curve on trying to, get on top of social distancing and all of that.
Right.
I don't really know, but whatever it is, they've done a pretty good job so far.
Right. I mean, if it held steady for a couple of weeks where there was essentially no new cases, they are doing a good job compared to what we see in the US, where we're just so far behind, places like Italy too, the response is just so slow. So, right, you were teaching English in Vietnam. I'm curious.
Sorry, you're cutting out.
Yikes. Okay, I'll repeat that. Yeah, so you were teaching English in Vietnam, correct? Yes? Can you hear that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So that's right.
Were you responsible for communicating to the kids at all what was going on? Like, how did the rise of the virus play into
No. So I really didn't have anything to do with it. I haven't seen the kids since I left for Tet, which was January 17th, January 18th, something like that was the last day of classes before the break. So I haven't seen the kids in 2 months. And this all, like I said, this all really started developing while I was away in Cambodia. So by the time I came back, it was too far gone for me to see them again. So no, I had nothing to do with that. That was all done through the school and the parents, I assume. Yeah.
So it really all blew up over Tet during that like spring break.
That's when it started.
Gotcha.
That's when it started, right? It hasn't. It really started to escalate within the last couple of weeks. When we got back from Tet, they closed schools. That was the first thing to go. Was schools were closed down, and then it pretty much held steady for a while after schools were closed down. There weren't really many new developments for a little while.
Right.
But now, even when my building started doing things like putting hand sanitizer in the elevators, like it felt more like a precaution than anything that was actually like a response to a serious problem at that point. And I want to preface this by saying that it's hard to know exactly what's true and what's false, but now we're hearing stories about people who are breaking quarantines, people who are running from the authorities and stuff like that. So I don't know how reliable those are, but clearly some people have gotten through in the interim. So it's really now bars and restaurants bars and karaoke parlors, movie theaters, massage parlors, a handful of other places are closed down throughout the city. And in District 1, which is like downtown, the main area, the big touristy area, all restaurants are closed too, even. So we're getting there, you know what I mean? But it's really just been within the last, I think it was last weekend, all the bars and restaurants closed. So it's pretty recent.
That's same thing with America. I mean, in New York City, only on Monday did they close bars and restaurants, or maybe we got it late Sunday night or something like that. But there's what's the state right now in terms of quarantines? Are they telling people to stay home or?
No, not yet. Okay. I haven't heard much from, the authorities on social distancing and stuff, but, keep in mind, I get all of my news, all of my information from the government secondhand because it's all in Vietnam. So it's possible that they've said something that hasn't crossed my path yet, but certainly there's nobody enforcing a quarantine. I'm still allowed out of my apartment. I went shopping. I got a haircut yesterday. Like there's still stuff going on. Definitely. I look out my window. There's still traffic on the streets and stuff. So no quarantine yet. Again, we've heard rumors, but no confirmation at this point. Yeah. Yeah.
You wear a mask when you go outside?
Yeah, definitely. I've started to.
Good.
Yeah.
Good man.
It's actually, again, I don't know how reliable this is, but I heard that they've instituted they can fine you now if you're not wearing a mask in public.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's good. It's good. I'm on board with it.
Yeah. So I bet, and you haven't had any communication with your students. You don't have anything where the school hasn't asked you to prepare.
Sorry, you're going to need to repeat this question.
No problem. I'm wondering, you haven't had any communication with your students like online. They haven't asked you to prepare any online classes or anything like that, or coursework.
No,
online.
So my two main jobs were teaching children, right? I taught the ages that I taught were from 1.5 years to 6 years old. So they're not going to be doing much online,
Right. Yeah.
Now I do also have I have an adult that I tutor also privately, and I've continued doing that. We've moved our lessons online, and he hooked me up with his sister's in-laws actually. So I've got 6-7.5 hours a week of a little bit of work. So it's enough to kind of get through my day-to-day expenses and all of that, but certainly not enough to really support myself here. But I'm not unique in that at all. So
Yeah. So what's the school? You weren't on a salary basis there. It was hourly.
No, it was hourly. Yeah. I do have friends who are salaried teachers, and they are getting paid. I know one of my friends, he had time off when it first started and when schools first closed. And then after a period of time, they had him come in even with no students and just like prepare some stuff, clean the school, whatever. That was a couple weeks ago now though. And I'm not sure if he's still been going in since then. So I live with two kids who don't teach, and they've still been going into work, clearly at a somewhat reduced capacity, but they're still going in, they still have meetings, etc. So it's not totally at a standstill here, at least not yet.
Right. And it's not work. The emphasis isn't work from home right now. Like, people are still reporting to the office.
At this point, it seems that way. Yeah.
It seems that way. Right. Based on your roommates and, what you've seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The people that I've come into contact with, I have a Vietnamese friend who works at a flower shop. I know she's still working. So that's certainly non-essential. You know what I mean?
I hope you picked up a nice bouquet for the weekend,
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna need something to get me through.
Yeah. Some roses. Right.
To brighten up the quarantine a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, make sure you're not allergic to the pollen though, because
otherwise I'll get the authorities knocking on my door. We hear you coughing. What's going on?
You're coughing and sneezing a lot. So as the virus moved through Vietnam initially after Tet, did you have thoughts about coming back to the States? Has that crossed your mind at all?
Not really. I've thought about it. Obviously, it's something that you need to think about, but it's not something that I've thought too seriously about, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
I was very concerned for a little bit about my visa. My visa is good until May 1st, the current visa that I'm on. The previous times I've renewed my visa, the easiest way to do it is to do what's called a border run, which is basically you hop on a bus from here to Cambodia. You go across the border, they give you a Cambodian visa, and you come right back, and they give you a new Vietnamese visa.
Wow.
It's incredible. They because so much of their economy is tourism based.
Tourism, right?
So the visa situation is very easy. It's not a difficult thing at all.
Right.
But
now
they've started closing down borders and stuff, and at this point they've stopped issuing new visas, which means that the only way to stay longer is to extend my current visa.
Right.
And I heard before all of this went down, I heard that was a lot more difficult than doing just a border run. So I haven't done that yet. It's also more expensive. But, once they started closing borders, I was like, all right, I guess that's the way to do it. And it turned out that I checked some Facebook pages, etc. And for a period of time, they stopped issuing extensions too. They started issuing only 1 month extensions instead of 3 month extensions, which, if you get me from May to June, that's great. But like in June, I'm not so convinced that this is going to be calm enough that like I can go home,
Exactly.
So I was very concerned for a little while. I didn't sleep one night basically because I was up on Facebook just trying to find as much information as I could. But thankfully, as of right now, they have started issuing the extensions again. Unfortunately, you can't apply for one until like a week or two before your current visa is set to expire. So I can't send my visa in and get an extension yet. Right. And there's a possibility that they'll stop issuing them again in the interim. So not out of the woods yet. But to be honest, I think it's more like I'll probably just overstay my visa if I'm being honest with you. If it comes down to it.
Absolutely.
It's a fine if I get caught overstaying my visa. They're not going to kick me out or anything. And I am honestly like, I don't want to travel right now. I feel more confident, frankly, in the government's response to it here than I do in the States right now. Right. And I just don't want to travel unnecessarily. Like it's just, there's no reason to, as far as I'm concerned. And on top of that, all of the people in my life that I'm worried about are in New York. So why am I going to risk exposing them to something else that I bring back from here? Like it just doesn't make sense to me. So, unless the American government says, you either got to come home now or you're there for the duration, and the duration's looking like it's going to be like a year or two. I'm probably riding it out here. That's how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Things are still okay here. So, yeah.
You think it's going to be a year or two?
No. That's not. No. What I meant was if the government says that,
okay,
and it's looking like it's going to be a year or two, I'll come home. But
right.
If not, short
not.
of that,
You'll probably ride it out.
Yeah.
And what was your plan to stay? If this hadn't happened, were you planning on coming back in May or the end of the summer, or?
No, originally I have a lease here, and my lease goes through November 20th, I think.
Okay.
And so originally my plan was to come home at that point, but even before all of this started, I'd been thinking about maybe staying a little bit longer. There were some problems getting myself set up here and finding a stable job. I found a couple that, I didn't last me very long. The teaching market is good here. There's a lot of opportunity, but it's not very stable. So there's a lot of turnover. And so it can be difficult to find consistent work. So I had some issues getting myself set up here initially. And so it was looking like I wasn't going to be able to do all of the things that I want to do in Southeast Asia before I leave.
Right.
So I was already thinking that I might stay a little bit longer, but now, with all of this going on, this is pushing my timeline back even further.
Right.
So if I can swing it and I can find work, I think I'm going to start looking for work outside of teaching. If I can swing it and I can find some work, I probably end up staying here past November. At this point, it's March, so things can change in the next 8 months. But but as of right now, that's kind of where I'm leaning. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, certainly. Especially if you have more things you want to do in that region of the world, right? When's the next time you'll be back there?
Right, exactly. And again, I wasn't going to have the money initially, and now with all this Corona crap, everything's shut down. It's just delaying things even further, which how can I really complain? First world problem and a half. But
yeah, you're happy and healthy.
In terms of my plans, I'm probably going to end up staying here a little bit longer, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, for Americans, coronavirus has really only begun to become a serious issue in this past, week or so, as our lives have been disrupted, because generally as Americans, we think of ourselves in a bubble. So I'm wondering, what was it like as an American in Vietnam to hear so little about it from the American media as your life in Vietnam started to change?
Well, I there was a period of time for a few weeks, right, where every other story you were hearing about it said the opposite thing, right? One story would say that, oh, it's not that bad, we're going to be fine, whatever. The next story would say, oh, we're all dying, So, so there was a lot of sort of uncertainty about how bad it was actually going to be, and how seriously you had to take it, and of course, everyone was taking it. At least everyone in my life here was taking it with some degree of seriousness, but I don't know if anybody was really, really understood the gravity of the situation until pretty recently, and so I don't know that. I'm not sure that there was anything that at least for me, that felt different being specifically American, right? But I think, you can kind of just look at it on a grand scale. I don't think anybody was really sure what was going on. And so what was interesting, though, was not so much seeing the media, but just the differing responses by the governments, right? Whereas I'm here, and again, all of my information is secondhand here, but I'm here and I can see how effective they've been, right? And how much they've done to, at this point, try and slow the spread of it.
Right.
And, this could change, but so far they've done a really good job. And, you compare that with what's going on in America. And I speak to my mother with some regularity, and I speak to friends and stuff. it boggles the mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I keep saying, and you know, maybe this is a little bit messed up to say, but I'm surprised by it. I really I feel more comfortable here.
Right.
I honestly feel more comfortable riding this out here than I do going back home right now.
Right.
And I wouldn't have expected that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And not just because it's home. You
Right.
know,
Right.
I would have expected myself to want to be home for this, but
Right.
you look at what's happening there, and it doesn't. There's no part of it that makes me want to go home. You know?
Absolutely, man. I mean, if I was in your position, I think I would probably feel the same way. I mean, it just seems like it's very out of hand here, whereas in Vietnam, they did a great job to flatten the curve initially. So, you know, yes, there will still be cases, but it does seem like it's more under wraps, and people at least are, I don't know, better adjusted to it.
Well, the other thing you need to remember is that this isn't the first outbreak of this sort that this part of the world has seen.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. SARS.
It has never developed to quite the pandemic level that it's at now. But this isn't the first time that people here have seen something like this. You know what I mean? I was talking to my student, and he said, like, you know, I would expect about 3 months. Usually when things like this happen, it's about 3 months. So that just said to me, like, you know, this is something that they have some experience dealing with. They have some familiarity with. And whether the 3-month figure is accurate or not, I don't know. But it just shows you they have a different attitude towards it because they've dealt with something like it before. Whereas we really haven't. This is totally uncharted territory for us, pretty much.
Right. At least in the modern era, right? I mean, the Spanish flu comes to mind, but that's like 1918, you know?
Right, exactly. You almost,
so far back.
You can almost not count that, you know?
Exactly, right. Yeah. Americans, we think we're invincible. We don't think anything can ever happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Vietnam was Vietnam affected in 2003 by the SARS outbreak, the original one?
I believe so. In fairness, you know, the person that I spoke with, that I tutor, also does a lot of business in China. So he's in China with some regularity.
Sure.
So he could have been sort of projecting what happened in China. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that. In any real way. So I'm not sure, but I think it says something about the culture and the way that people are acting about it. You know, I do think people in this part of the world, you know, even if they weren't as hard hit by SARS, it was much closer to home. You know what I mean? Than it is for us. It was for us. So. You know, I think just that alone, having something like that that's basically in your backyard or in a neighboring country or whatever, it forces you to pay attention a little bit more, you know? And so, you know, just I think that alone, just having that experience, even if they weren't hard hit here, just having that experience can help, I think, people who have seen something like that before, you know?
Right. And that, you know, that's remarkable because then we think about, like, you know, swine flu in 2009 and like how hard, or I believe it was 2009, but how hard Mexico was hit. You know, Mexico was devastated during that. And of course it got a lot of press in the American media, but then, you know, as soon as it was over, because it didn't really affect Americans that much, it was like, it was just a news story. It wasn't like, this is a cautionary tale. Like, this is.
Yeah. I mean, so swine flu is really interesting, right? Because we never found a cure for it. We never fixed it. It just faded into the amalgam of diseases that we deal with every winter now. Like, that's what swine flu, like, it just became part of the normal repertoire of crap that we deal with every year. People still get it every year, but like, it just stopped being a big deal. So swine flu, which if this wasn't so infective, or infectious, excuse me, edit that out.
Yeah,
if this wasn't so infectious, I think we'd probably see the same, but it's spreading so damn quick that we can't, you know, I don't think we can get a real handle on it right now. But you're right. I wonder how much swine flu really penetrated our psyche, you know what I mean? So fun fact, I got swine flu. in that whole thing.
Oh, wow.
I contracted swine flu in that whole thing. But even me, like, you know what I mean? Like I when all of this stuff was surfacing, right, about Corona, it took me some time to take it seriously. I mean, I obviously, you know, I was taking it seriously, but it took me some time before it really like it sunk in what we were actually facing. So, you know, and I got swine flu. Granted, I was young, but like I got it. So, what does that tell you about how what we learned from history? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Despite getting swine flu, it's still like, Corona's not such a big deal. Maybe it's a big deal. Oh, wait, it's a big deal.
Sorry, you cut out.
You lost me again.
I
made a swine flu joke, but it's okay. Little Miss Piggy over here. So
okay, I got you now.
Okay, you've mentioned a few times that you get your news sort of secondhand because it comes down from the government in Vietnamese first. How does that sit with you in a time like this? Is that nerve-wracking? Are you speaking to any Vietnamese?
Hang on, I'm sorry. I basically missed that entire question.
No problem. I'll repeat it. Yeah. So this damn internet connection, you know. So basically,
it's rough. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. So, you know, basically the question is, you know, you've mentioned a few times that you get your news basically secondhand because the government, you know, sends it out in Vietnamese, which of course you don't know fluently. And as a result, you wait to get it, you know, in English. Does the government issue it in English?
No.
No.
Not that I've seen.
Right. So how are you getting the news about the disease and the updates from the government about what you're supposed to do? And is it nerve-wracking, at least in a time like this, you know, despite feeling safer there?
I wouldn't necessarily say nerve-wracking. I would say more uncertain. Mm-hmm. It's you know, the problem that you run into is that then you, especially because a lot of where I get my news, and I know that this is bad, is on Facebook, right? Because there are expat groups and teachers groups and all of that are posting things and updates and all of that, right? But A, you need to rely on someone else's translation, which like can always be spotty in the first place. But B, you know, it's Facebook, so people can say whatever the fuck they want. Yeah. So, you know, it's hard to know what's legit and what's reliable and what's not. So that's the biggest problem that I've encountered, you know. Just for example, I thought there were no confirmed cases in Saigon because that was the last thing I had heard. And I spoke to my mother and she was like, nope, 4 confirmed cases. So it's just like the flow of information, at least to expats and to non-Vietnamese speakers, is not great. There's a lot of following the pack, which is not always the most effective strategy. But it's kind of what we have right now. And, you know, you can't blame the government for not putting this crap out in English. Like, it's not their responsibility, you know?
Right. I just think it's surprising that Vietnam doesn't prepare any, you know, news releases in languages that aren't Vietnamese, considering the fact that they know that they have so many tourists and English speakers here, you know, like in America and the trains, you know, in the subway in New York, like they have everything and they have it in 8 different languages, in Chinese and Russian. English and Spanish.
Right. So 2 things. Number 1 is that Vietnam, yes, there are expats here, and yes, there are tourists here, but overall, it's a pretty homogenous country. There are very few minorities here. It is pretty much Vietnamese people here in Vietnam, you know? So there isn't as much of an obligation, I think, for the government to feel like they need to do that, because I don't know, I'm pulling this number out of my ass, but if I had to guess, 95% of the population is Vietnamese.
Sure.
You know? So that's A. And B, I will say there are some news publications that publish in English or partially in English. So Saigon Times has some stuff in English. VN Express, which has some stuff in English. But again, I don't know, like, is VN Express a legit newspaper or is it a tabloid? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to gauge these things when the majority of this stuff is not in your language, you know?
Right.
So there are some news outlets that publish some stuff in English. My mom probably keeps better tabs on that stuff than I do, to be honest with you. So there's some stuff there, but to be honest, you know, if there's anything, if anything very big happens, we find out about it. If no other way than through my two roommates who work for companies, right? They don't work for schools. So, for example, when bars and restaurants close down, one of my buddies works in alcohol distribution here. So his company knew right away that all bars and restaurants were closing down.
Right.
So we knew the day before it happened. Obviously, that doesn't happen all the time, but
right.
Big news, big pieces of news, big changes we hear about pretty quickly. And other things, you know, for most things, we're not really going to change what we're doing. I'm still staying inside as much as I can. I'm washing my hands very carefully. I'm wearing a mask when I go outside. You know, you take all of the precautions that you can.
Right.
And, you know, short of some major shift happening in the environment or the government instituting some major new policy or whatever, not much is going to really change how you are responding to it, as long as you're doing the things that you should be doing. You know what I mean?
Totally. I think that's well said. And you can only do so much. You're right. I mean, as an individual, regardless of the news that comes out, right? You know, stay inside, wash the hands.
Yeah.
Take vitamin C. I don't know if you're doing that. Having a lot of oranges.
It's my roommates went to pharmacies to like try and find some stuff. My roommate was looking for hydrogen peroxide and like he couldn't find it. So like there's starting to be shortages and stuff. When we went to we went to like the big box, you know, the big wholesale supermarket that they have here, and stocked up. We got a big like 25 kilo bag of rice and just like, you know, got a bunch of doomsday crap just in case.
Sure.
But you know, you walk in and you know, they're taking your temperature at the front door. They're taking temperatures at downstairs in my building too when you walk in.
Wow.
So they're taking as many precautions as they can. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's the testing situation like in terms of the actual virus? Like aside from temperature, has there been?
I'm not sure. I'd imagine. I don't know the details of this, but I would assume that, you know, they're testing publicly for fevers, right? You have a fever. I imagine they send you to get tested. If you test positive, they probably put you in quarantine while you're getting tested, probably separate from other people, because if other people are positive and you're not, or vice versa. Right. But they probably put you in quarantine for a little bit. They test you, and if you test positive, they put you in a bigger quarantine. And if you test negative, they probably restrict you to home. You know, they say, go home, don't leave your apartment. Right. That's a guess, but seems the logical, if they're screening for temperatures, that seems the logical steps, you know, to take to me, but I don't know for sure.
Totally. Okay. Well, closing thoughts on COVID. Any final things about your situation, your impact, your story?
Just, you know, I don't think short of being in a different country, I don't think my story is super unique. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know, I think I'm dealing with a lot of the same things that everybody's dealing with. Everybody's unsure of what's happening next. Nobody's really sure when they're going to get back to work. Nobody's sure of, you know, their money situation, et cetera. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty going around. But, you know, the only thing I'd say is just listen to doctors, do the things that you're supposed to be doing. Don't fight this bullshit information war that doesn't exist. And wash your hands, take care of yourselves, and remember that protecting yourself is as much about protecting other people as it is about protecting you. But other than that, just, you know, do what you can. That's it. And try and keep yourselves occupied too. Stay sane.
Yes, stay sane. Yeah, especially for people our age, right? I mean, like the social distancing thing has a great effect on us.
I'm very lucky in that I have 3 roommates, you know, so I have 3 roommates that I like, and that we all like each other.
That's huge.
So that makes a big difference. You know, but it's tough, definitely, you know, people who don't have roommates or whatever. So stay in touch with your friends, because otherwise you're going to go nuts. So Yeah, that's what I got for you.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on COVID Chats.
Of course.
Episode
Thanks
2
for having me.
in the books.
Hell yeah.
Okay, bud. Stay safe. And let's
Thanks,
talk
man.
soon, dude. We can do this whenever, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stay in touch, brother. All right.